Hello and welcome to Make It Work, the bi-weekly podcast where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their career paths whilst putting family first. Hi, I'm Sarah Wong and welcome to the third interview of our special coaching and counselor series. Joanne Tan is a certified counselor and a homeschooling mother of 3 young boys. She was born in Hong Kong, spent a few years there before moving to Australia where she grew up. And most recently, 4 years ago, she moved to Singapore with her husband and then her 2 kids. Yes, I know what you're thinking. How does she do it? Well, join me as we hear her story as well as how she counsels her clients, many of whom are working moms themselves. Let's go. Hi, Jo.
Hi.
Hey, how are you this wonderful evening, 9 p.m.?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, really grateful for you to make it work tonight for us to meet. Yeah.
It's so good to really get a sense of your life in that you basically start work this time, right?
Yeah, I work at noonings after the kids all go to bed. Yeah.
Well, okay, without further ado, let's have you, share your story in under 2 minutes if you can.
Okay, so just a bit about myself. My name's Jo. I homeschool my 3 boys between the age of 3 to 8, and I have my own counselling practice, which I started in 2019. And I'm from Australia, living in Singapore for the past 4 years or so. My husband works at the church in Singapore, and fun fact is I love ice cream in winter rather than in summer. So
Very interesting. Well, I guess you can't really have that in Singapore.
yeah, even chocolate melts in the normal day. Like you have to ice it, so it's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, fun fact is also that we met in the same church.
Yeah.
And when I found out about Jo and what she's doing, which she'll share more about, I was just blown away. 3 kids, homeschooling, and doing an online counseling practice, of which I know friends who go to you as their counselor and speak so highly of you. So really excited to have you here today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really an honor.
All right. Well, tell us how a day in a life of Jo looks like with all this crazy balls that you have to juggle.
So actually, I start my day by sleeping in, and my kids are taken care of by my husband, Chen. They would either be fighting over the sink or fighting over who plays piano first. And the first thing I do is to get my coffee, and I'm trying to finish a Bible reading plan at the moment. But after all that chaos, we begin homeschooling. We read books about poetry or Christian history. And then we do seat work, which is like handwriting and maths. And it's chaos half the time. The boys fight and I have to mediate often, but they have a lot of fun with each other. And I think homeschooling does bring another dimension to family life that is not often experienced. So I'm kind of keen to keep going and give them a good foundation, slow down their childhood before they face the world out there. So after homeschooling, we go into lunch and then we go outdoors. We either go to the playground or do swimming or meet some friends. And then after dinner, that's when I start work, when the kids all go to bed. So yeah.
Wow. And is this every day that you are working at the night when your kids are down?
Yeah. Like it's every day. It didn't start off that way, but as my practice grew, it became almost every night. Yeah. Yeah.
I need to have the supplements that you're having. I don't know if you even have that. How do you get the energy that you get? You have 3 boys.
We were
You're teaching them. And then at night, you're counseling other people. Where do you get your strength?
I actually think that, like homeschooling does take a lot out of me, like being with the kids all day. But then actually counseling, it brings me back to life because I'm actually inputting into someone else's life. And so I actually go to bed fuller than if I didn't do work at all. So it's a bit ironic, but actually it's me. In some way, I'm actually gaining from that counseling experience and doing that with others. So yeah, I don't know if that actually makes sense, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
how it really feels for me.
That's really interesting that you found the work as the one that really gives life to you. And oftentimes when we think about work, it's like work. It's like a dread. It's something that you pour in and you get really tired. But it's the opposite for you, which is actually I think a great ideal that people work towards. So I'm so glad you found that. Well, maybe if you could bring us back to those days when you were still, figuring all this out. How did you overcome the biggest challenges that you experienced?
Just on what you were saying about like how I found my ideal, my biggest challenge is actually that I have so many ideals and I have these desires that I have. Like I want to homeschool, I want to work, I want my kids to learn instruments, I want to go overseas and do mission work. And like I've had these struggles with ideals in my head and my mind before work and family came into my life. Like I wanted to stay single, but then I met Jen. And so it was always very hard to please. And I always felt like there was always these competing desires. But honestly, it all came to a head when I just decided I'm going to give it all to God and tell God to take care of it all. And that trusting Him, knowing that He's got a path for me to take and I can just give it to Him and I'll know that He'll do the best for me. And I mean, on the other hand, like, living this life that doesn't look like 9 to 5 with it. And I think it's the cost, that I'm choosing to bear. Like, whilst other moms are out there hanging out with each other when kids are in school, I'm kind of at home. And when they are all maybe getting together in the evening after work, I'm starting my work. So it is a cost, but I do think of it as that, I wanted these things and that God actually made it a way for me to do it. So I just choose to honor it and live it out. Yeah.
Wow, Jude, I would love to kind of unpack what you just shared. So if you could bring us back to when you were still a counselor at your church and you're figuring out what to do with when your kids came on and you were also thinking about overseas work and things like that. Yeah. What were your thoughts? What were you thinking?
Yeah. When I finished my master's, I was just thinking then it's time to have kids. And I remember grieving about how like I just finished my master's and now I can't use it. And now I'm going to have kids and then I'm going to sit at home and not do anything with my degrees. And I remember even thinking like, growing up, we are told you can do anything. Like we are told you can be anything you want to be. And it felt like it's not real at that time. And so then I just grieved. I literally just felt like it was like coming to an end. My life as my own is coming to an end. And I had a really good mentor at the time and I raised this with her. And she said to me, you might think motherhood would take away these things from you, but actually motherhood will give you insight that you won't have otherwise to life and being able to share and counsel other people with. And that was really insightful. And at that time, I didn't get it. It didn't, but it stuck with me. And so now I look back and I realize how true it was that, motherhood does add to all the things I actually have and am doing. But practically, I think I stopped my practice. I stopped working and I only started it again when I was moving to Singapore, thinking that I'll just keep up my skills with some clients that I still had at the time. And to be honest, like my greatest person that made it all work for me is my husband. Like Chen never told me not to try. He never told me what I'm asking for is too much. He knew me enough to know that if I don't try, it would really devastate me. So he knew I needed something. And so I started off small and he was super encouraging, taking on all the kids and things like that for me. And then when my practice grew, his capacity to take care of the kids also grew and he hasn't stopped supporting me. So I think that it's something very special. And I can easily say that, with his pursuit to come to Singapore would take away mine. But at the time, I remember also God reminding me that actually when he calls Chen or when he calls Chen to come, I'm also part of that call. Like there's a part for me to play. And when my counseling started growing, God was also calling Chen to be part of that and partner with me in doing it. So yeah, so I think that we kind of came to that quite early on. But trust me to say, like I still want to do more. I still don't get to do all that I want. But I know that there are times and seasons. So I still remember feeling like I was bursting when my youngest was under 1 and felt like I wanted to go and do many things, but I knew it wasn't the right time. So the thing for me to do at the time was to be at home and not work. So like we're not just going to go ahead and do everything all the time. Yeah.
There is so much richness there about understanding the times and seasons for which you are in and knowing what to take on or step back from. But at the same time, you really highlighted the role that Chin was, that unwavering support and pillar throughout the ups and downs and the moves and additions to the family and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. He is the support.
So good. So I'm sure many people have asked you this before. I would love to hear why and how you decided to homeschool your kids. It's such to me, a huge responsibility that as someone who's not been trained in any way in education for young kids. Yeah, I have two under the age of 4, and I mean, I just tear my hair out just spending, an hour trying to read a book or yeah, heads off. But how do you do it, and what made you do it?
The homeschooling journey began when there was this shift in education in Australia where they were introducing these fluid gender ideas to school systems. And it doesn't align with my beliefs. And I wasn't prepared to give my young children answers to questions actually I don't know how to answer at the time. And so the idea of holding them off until later came to mind. And that's what I was thinking of homeschooling their preschool years. And then my imagination went wild, thinking that that meant I can travel off peak, I can take them onto school them on the road. And it like just the dreams were like coming true in that sense. And again, that was the ideal me coming out. But when we moved to Singapore and we had only 1 year to settle, after that, COVID hit. And then so during COVID, it was homeschool or no school. And so we just picked it up from there. We decided that that would be the way to go.
Oh.
And it's kind of like the firsts never stopped, like you get to have your kids' first words, first steps. And now like in homeschooling, it's like you get to have them first reading a book, first song they learn, first alphabet, first writing their name. So it's kind of like baby steps still going. And then eventually your capacity and knowing how they learn grow. And so that's how we kind of kept going into homeschooling after COVID as well. Yeah.
Any kind of advice that you would give yourself now that you've been in the journey for 4 or 5 years? If you were to go back to yourself and as an early young mom, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, I would say enjoy it more. Like, I think I was quite a stress head. I kept trying to answer my own what ifs and wonderings. And I think I wish I enjoyed it more. Like, I look at my photos and it's like, it looks like I had so much fun, but I also remember all the angst I was feeling and all those things. And so I would tell myself to just go and enjoy it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I think in the moment it's hard too when there's so much going on.
Yeah.
It's these memories that we take away, right, at the end of the day. Can't we
Yeah.
really remember what was the argument before? We only remember the feelings, the emotion.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah. Well, now shifting a little bit from, you sharing your story, would love to have you, Jo, to put on your counselor hat and tell us a little bit about the kind of questions that you observe as a counselor, especially because working moms form a large portion of your client base.
Yeah. I think very often you're hearing like the adjustment to having kids is such a huge shock to their system in the sense of like their way to relate, the way to function. And so it's asking of them some things that they didn't realize and it takes them off guard. So often when they come, it's like we're trying to figure out how to kind of move on from there. And often they might be asking me like, how do they cope with all that life demand of me, right now with the season of having young kids? And it can also take the form of like asking practically, like, how do I actually still have my time? How do I make time for my marriage? How do I, work and function? And, there are things like dynamics in relationship changes, like with in-laws or, husband and wives. So a lot of the how-tos come to front with that practical sense of trying to figure out this season of life. And another one that's a bit deeper is that sometimes being a mother can bring about a sense of trying to wrestle with how you were brought up by your mom, right?
Yeah.
So often they actually have to come and reconcile with how their mom mothered them. And then what does that mean to now be a mother to someone else? And that can take the form of forgiveness and love and acceptance. And, and it's just a cycle of things that come with that. And then lastly, I'd say loneliness, like being a mom can be very isolating and there's so much demanded from you. And then you have this new role you have to take on. And it can be very isolating. And, the way that we do mumming now, if you will, a term, it's very much on your own. And so back in the day, I think there was a lot more community involved or like, even aunties and uncles would be around more, things like that. And so I think that it takes mums nowadays to be vulnerable and being intentional to reach out and connect with other people, and then learning that skill for themselves. through counseling and accepting even the fact that, yes, this is what I'm struggling with. So those are the main things I
Mm,
would say, yeah, for working moms.
yeah. No, I definitely identify with almost all of them. The sense of identity shift, figuring out new relationships, figuring out who I am because of my family of origin, my own upbringing. I didn't realize going into motherhood is like I'm forced to think about why I do certain things, why I value certain things like, education or the sleep.
Mm.
And it's made me really wonder, where I had those assumptions and thinkings from. And I realized a lot of times, my own family and my parents, because it's often very different from how my husband would react to certain things, like say
Yeah.
spending time with the kids or going outdoors and things like that, because we have had so different childhoods, and that itself also becomes a point of oftentimes tension or conflict.
Yeah.
That the craziness of having to deal with kids at that point in time, but also figuring out a new version of myself.
Yeah.
And I realized that the best thing has been to speak with other people about it and to find community, because that's when I'm not in my own headspace all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's taken quite a lot to do that, especially when I had my first. I was in the US by myself without, you know, family. We had friends, but they were, rather new friends. And it took a lot to almost just sort of accept help.
Mm-hmm.
Having, been independent for most of my life, at least overseas, like it was a new thing to even accept like a meal train and people just dropping in and giving food. It definitely taught me the beauty of actually doing things together and being open to just have people come in the mess of my house then in the early days of mothering. So shifting it back to how you would counsel them, can you talk a little bit about how you guide and counsel your clients?
Mm-hmm. I'm not quite sure if there's anything different in that sense of how I counsel. But if anything, I would say that I do subscribe to knowing that God is great, our greatest counselor in life. And if He knows us better than we know ourselves. And so in counseling, my offering to people is to give them that time to meet themselves, to meet their wounds, to meet their brokenness and their needs and wants. And from that place, try and learn to heal. And there's a part of me that always know I'm not carrying their burdens, but I'm bringing compassion and empathy to their situation. And sometimes that is already so comforting for someone to have that space, someone that accepts all of it, to unpack themselves and find answers. And I think counseling, for one, brings a person out of their normal rhythm, and it makes them sit and ponder on life itself. And it's such a unique place to be in already. And I think of it as a gift, that I get to be entering to that place with somebody else and find a story, find the narratives that they have, and then start kind of thinking about an overview that 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 is happening, like an overview of their life. And that can be really helpful to gain perspectives. And then lastly, as Christians, it's a time to pause and seek the counsel of someone greater, knowing that God is sovereign and knows all before it happens and knows all the details of what's happened to us in the past. And that can bring eternal perspective, right, to the situation. So it can really just open up our minds and eyes. That's my main goal, in a sense, in counseling, to see where you're at in life and then where you're heading and what are some tools and resources that you have to do that.
Hey, Joe, I had a question because I've spoken to coaches as well. So how would you differentiate the role of a coach versus a counselor?
That's a good question. I think it's not very different, to be honest, but I would say that counselor often have more of a training on mental health disorders, and they would have more of an awareness and knowing how to assess people for their disorders. And so it's more like not just guiding them to a direction, but actually really being with them in their brokenness. And sometimes it takes a lot for a person to change their minds, right? Like there's so much that we believe in and think in a certain direction. And a counselor is there to sort of help redirect the thoughts or think alternatively rather than harming the self. It's about kind of opening themselves up. And I'm not sure if a coach would be doing that similar thing to that extent, but I'm sure that it would have some kind of element to that. But yeah, so I think so it's kind of like a coach and then a counselor and then a psychologist and then a psychiatrist, right? So that's sort of the degree of clinical approach to the mental health space.
Oh, okay. That's a really helpful kind of framework because it feels like it's pretty common where I see many people starting to take up coaching as a potential area that they want to grow into. And I've been trying to also wrap my head around the difference between coaching versus counseling. Just putting a hypothetical situation where there's a working mom who is going through these kind of challenges at work, at home. When would she be ready for counseling or coaching? How should she think about what and who could she go to during
Mhm.
this time?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think it really depends on what she's looking for, right? If she's looking for someone to coach her on how to do things or how to take the next steps or just be able to move her from this place to the next place, right? I think a coach would be the one. But if someone is like in that place and there's a lot of pressure and she wants to tease out these issues, right? And unpacking the struggles, the conflict, and perhaps even learning some communication skills, perhaps on how to express the self and learning about her own emotions and learning to hold her emotions, even though it might be painful, for example. Those are more, I would say, those are more of a counselor's role. But to be honest, I haven't actually taken any coaching training myself. So I wouldn't fully know the difference, but that's what I would suspect. That's what the difference would look like for someone. Yeah. But again, I think it's down to what that person's looking for. Even in counseling, there are so many approaches, right? And so
Yeah.
it depends on what this person is looking for. And it may be a hit and miss at times, and it may take some time to shop around to find the right counselor with the right way and approach that is comfortable for them. So,
Right. Wow. This is a really helpful kind of one-on-one for me to kind of have a roadmap of sorts to understand the difference between life coach versus a counselor. And you're saying that for coaches, it would be if you maybe have a sense of where you want to go, where you're headed, it will be helpful to lean towards a coach versus if you wanted to maybe dig deeper into your feelings, emotions, history, a counselor might be more of what you need at that point.
yeah.
Interesting. And I'm sure with more emphasis on self-care and mental health, it's probably more common and very acceptable nowadays to have people seeing counselors or coaches or therapists. Yeah, and even doing it online too, I guess. Like we would have been quite, I guess, unexpected before COVID, but I'm sure that's really helped to ramp that up and help you in being able to do what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Without online, I don't think I can do what I do right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly.
All right, Joe. So, what is one thing you would like listeners to take away from your story as we kind of wrap up over here?
Sure. If you resonated with whatever I've shared, my encouragement is to keep going, read the books you need to read, find out the answers you're looking for, go that extra mile, such as yourself, starting a podcast, having these conversations with people, and find your passion and your joy. Don't settle. Don't be afraid of failure. You won't always succeed, but you'll definitely learn and grow throughout the experience. So my advice is to take away is to just keep going and pursue it.
Yeah, a quote that I recently saw that has stuck in my head is that a winner is just a loser who tried one more time.
So true most of the time, right? Like it's just, yeah, I think the idea of like only by stopping the search, you'll find nothing. Like there's always something. Yeah. If you keep looking, you'll find more.
Yeah. Well, if listeners want to connect with you, Joe, what are areas that you can talk endlessly about and love learning about?
I love, talking about discipling young people in particular to follow Jesus. I love talking about God and what he's doing in your life. I love the outdoors. I love learning about the original design of life, the richness and simplicity of it, and how we can get back to that with our complicated lives here right now. So I believe and I love talking about the source of life. And that's where I think fulfillment will be found. So anything about those kind of things, I love talking about. Yeah.
Okay. Very insightful. Thank you for your time, Jo.
No, thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to Make It Work, where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their careers whilst putting family first. Please help others discover the show by leaving a review and rating on wherever you get your podcasts. And see you at the next episode of Make It Work.